Welcome to our channel, $1 Million Made Easy. In this video, I want to answer the questions, what's the highest safe withdrawal rate? A lot of people recommend the 4% rule, so let's just run some numbers and see what might be the reason for that question. Let's say, for example, you got 600,000 saved up, and you want to do the 4% rule. Again, these numbers aren't so important. We could do 1.2 million and 4,000, whatever. The main thing is this is the withdrawal percentage. 4% would be 2,000. In other videos, we take into account asset allocation. We take into account if you get Social Security or pensions. But we're just simply looking at what's a safe withdrawal percentage. What's the highest one you could possibly feel comfortable with. So we're going to go ahead and run the numbers for, in this case scenario, for 4%. And what we do is use the returns for the last 100 years for the S&P 500, the actual historical returns. We project what similar returns might do for you in the future, and the resulting numbers are simply a possible range. So that's the numbers we're using. I just got 1966 highlighted here, showing all the returns there, what you would have. And we want to give this person a 3% COLA to try to keep up with inflation. So in other words, we're looking at $2,000, which is 4% withdrawal on a $600,000 beginning balance. And it's going up, increasing by 3% a year. So how many times in the last 100 years would you run into problems? Folks, look at this. Just 1929 and 1930. Why are those such problematic years? Because we had 4 down years, down another year, down 35%, and down 3 more years. The only other decade in the last 100 years where we really have a problem is the year 2000, which was a lot more recent. We're going to go ahead and run the numbers here. Right now, the year 2000 is no problem. The only time you have a problem is 1929, 1930. This is after 20 years, and this is after 30 years. These are the actual returns given the year, whether it's 1924. You can see them going across there. Let's see, go up here and show you how we got those. Just ran the numbers going down through here. After 10 years, you'd have 852,100. There's 852,000. After 10 years or 20 years, you have 1.269 and so on. So every other year except 1929, 1930, you'd have money left. In fact, the graph looks like this, folks. I mean, you'd be in great shape. Remember, you're starting out with 600,000. You got 2 million, 4 million. So almost every case, you'd be just fine. In fact, 97.5% of the time in the last 100 years, taking out 4%, you would be just fine. 3% of the time in the last 30 years, you'd have a problem. But basically, you're in just fine shape with the 4% rule. Let's sneak it up here a little bit. Again, we're trying to find out what's the safest withdrawal rate. If we go to 4.5% with percentage withdrawal rate, how much does that change? Does that change this 2% at all? We're going to go ahead and check out the numbers. Again, you're taking out 2250 now, increasing that by 3% a year. You still just have those 2 years. Those are the only 2 years in the last 100 years you have a problem taking out 4.5%. Most people would say, well, that's a pretty safe withdrawal rate then. Let's go to 5%. 2,500 on again on a $600,000 balance. Let's go ahead and update this. We're sneaking up to 4%. Went through 4.5%, 5%. Do we have any more issues? Again, we're using the data for the last 100 years. Now we've got a 5% situation. What's happening? We're getting the depression years. Yeah, we already saw that previously, but now we got a little sneaky one here. We got this decade of the 2000s, and we actually see with these 3 down years, you could have a problem with a 5% withdrawal rate. And 2000 was a lot more recent. So does that make you feel uncomfortable with a 5% withdrawal rate? You still have a 95% success rate after 20 years and 94.4 after 30 years. But we got that little pesky 2000, year 2000. Let's go ahead and look at the actual numbers here, show you how we're arriving at that. We're running out of money in 16 years. If we have, they call this sequence of returns risk. If you have some down years initially when you first retire, you could have an issue, especially with this 5% rule. The 4% rule you didn't with the year 2000, but 4.5% didn't, but the 5% withdrawal rate you do. But let's continue on because most people feel perfectly comfortable with a 95% success rate after 20 years. Let's go to 5.5% now. Let's go ahead and update that. Now, as you can see, we're up to a 9% failure rate. Most of those, a lot of those during the Depression years, but now we got, looks like 3 different years there in around 2000. You'd be running out of money. 1999, you'd be running out of money in 17 years. 1998, you're fine. You're down to a third of what you started with after 25 years, but most people feel comfortable with that. But 1999, you have a problem running out of money in 17 years. Year 2000, running out of money in 13 years. 2001, running out of 17 years. 2002, you're back up. Of course, there hasn't been 25 or 30 years since the year 2000, 2002. So you'd be just fine. Now you got a 91% success rate. That's with a 5.5% withdrawal rate. Let's continue on here. Let's go with the 6% withdrawal rate and see how that would work. Okay, now we're up to 11% failure rate after 20 years and 14% failure rate after 30 years. Again, you got an 80, almost 89% success rate. What's the graph look like for the 20-year? You got the Depression years, and again, you got around the year 2000. What happens if we go one more higher to 6.5%? Let's see what. Now we see we got a 17% failure rate. Let's look at the actual graph here. We got the Depression years. We also got this pesky little 1937. What happened in 1937? It was down 35%. We got a few more times around, looks like even 1998 got caught up in this down decade right here. You had some good years, but then you had these 3 down years and you're down 37%. Let's look at the actual numbers for 1998. Yeah, you're running out of money in 18 years. 1997, you're okay. So you had 3 good years before you got hit with those 3 consecutive down years. And so a 6.5% withdrawal rate might cause you pause. You still have an 82% success rate of 20 years and 78% success rate after 30 years. But would you consider that a safe withdrawal rate? Most people would like to see this at least around 90% or so. But again, it depends on what you think might happen in the future. Nobody knows the future. We've had a consecutive down years, decade, year 2000 to 2002, or 3 down years. That's really recent. A lot of people say don't look at the Depression years because that was so long ago. But again, as recently as the year 2000, we'd be running into problems with a 6.5% withdrawal rate. Let's just go one more and update this. 7% withdrawal rate, 3,500 on a balance of 600,000. At 7%, 22% of the time, you'd run into problems using the numbers for the last 100 years. You'd have a 77% success rate over 20 years and 71% over 30 years. Most people will probably not think that's a comfortable, safe withdrawal rate. Here's the actual graph. We're getting more times around the year, around the late 60s and early 70s, because again, we saw that had 2 down years right there. But that's what we do on this channel. We run all kinds of different numbers. What's a safe withdrawal rate? What are you comfortable with? Are you comfortable with a 95% success rate? You might want to go with 4 or 5% withdrawal rate. If you're comfortable with going a little bit higher than that, you could go a little bit higher. But again, what's the safe one? What's your definition of safe? But that's what we do on this channel. We run all kinds of different numbers. Normally, we would take into account asset allocation. We take into account what you might be getting for Social Security. But we just want to answer that question. What is a safe withdrawal rate? So as you can see, I went back to the 5% with 5% withdrawal rate, and we saw that 5% of the time we'd have an issue during the Depression years and also around the year 2000, but every other scenario would be just fine. So most people will be comfortable with the 5% withdrawal rate because that's got a 95% success rate after 20 years and a 94% after 30 years. Most of those during the Depression years. But that's what we do on this channel. We run all kinds of different numbers. Again, what's a safe withdrawal percentage? What's the highest one you can go to? We saw that 5% most people will be comfortable with. You start getting up to 6 and 7%, that's when this percentage of failure starts getting up there above 10%, which means less than 90% success rate. So most people would probably draw the line somewhere between maybe 5 and 6%. What would be a safe withdrawal rate? But that's what we do on this channel. We run all kinds of different numbers for people. We also answer some of the questions like this one we were trying to answer in this video. What's the highest safe withdrawal rate? But please consider subscribing to this channel. Please let people know that we answer questions like this. We run numbers for people. Please comment, please like the videos, and thanks for watching.